Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks to the Guild for inviting me, and to all of you for showing up. And do a couple things today. Am I doing this right? One is to just take you on a little fun wander through my creative world in the studio, what I'm making, what I'm looking at, where I work. And then the second part is to kind of jump over to the business side of what I do and share some of my experiences in running a creative business in San Francisco in 2019, which is a super interesting challenge, to say the least. So we'll start with the studio work. Shift this over a little bit. None of this is in any reasonable order at all, except I'm going to start in black and white and then go to color, sort of like television. So this is a pendant about 6 years ago. It's made from ebonized walnut, gesso, linen, and 18-karat gold. This is a photo of a temple wall that I took in Vientiane, Laos, a couple of years ago. This is a brooch in powder-coated steel, enamel, and 18-karat gold. And the process here is starting with a panel of steel that's powder-coated black. Then I layer white enamel paint on top of that. And the white enamel is softer than the powder coat. So I'm abrading with various scratchy things to make a sort of reductive drawing. And it's the kind of thing where I just start. There's no plan really. I just go until it seems like it's done. This is about 3 inches diameter. This is a shop window in Paris with many generations of tape that once held posters that are long gone. This is a garage door in the Mission near my studio that has had some kind of epic situation occur. I would give anything to be able to go back in time and be there for this, but I will never know. I've thought about this for so long. Like, what happened? If anyone has any ideas after, let me know. This is a necklace, again in ebonized walnut with white enamel. And with the walnut, I'm carving the forms in the wood and applying the white enamel on top of that. Then I abrade the wood to uncover the surface that I want, the contrast that I want. And the last step is to put a coat of iron acetate on the walnut. And iron acetate is basically just iron dissolved in vinegar. And it reacts with the tannins in the walnut wood and turns in this beautiful sort of charcoal brown black. So the last thing that happens is this beautiful graphic thing pops out. This is the wall of a burned out building in the Mission that has had no love for at least 2 or 3 years now. And it's been the site of this kind of hilarious visual turf war between presumably the landlord or the owner of the building and the local graffiti artists. And it's gone from black to white, back to black again, with all these amazing sort of stages in between that I have 2 years of documents of. And this was a particularly beautiful kind of Robert Motherwell moment that I was like, I really want to just take a saber saw to this and take it home. Like, I'm taking the wall now. There's something, I think it's easy to say this as someone with no skin in the game. I don't own the building, I'm not trying to protect a property, and I'm not trying to express my identity on the wall by a graffiti either, but to me this kind of all-out fight for life is really entertaining to see every day. There's something to me reassuring about when things we can't control just sort of take their own path and go sideways. Sometimes they end up so much more beautiful than we could have planned. This is a necklace, again in ebonized walnut, and these markings on the wood are just what came on the pieces of wood from the mill. And they're all a little bit different. Every piece of wood that arrives, I get wood from everybody. They just walk up to me and give me wood. And the markings are such a beautiful record of what happened to the wood before it got to me. And sometimes I sand them smooth, but this time I just thought, I'm going to just pull that out almost like a photograph. This is some kind of viscous liquid seeping out from under a warehouse door in Manhattan early in the morning a couple of years ago. And you can see my little feet at the bottom of the frame. So I've been literally stopped in my tracks by this thing of ultimate beauty. And we all have things that call to us when we're wandering through the world and sort of fill us with delight or other experiences. And I think it would be easy to use words like source material or inspiration or something like that to describe seeing these things and having this like hoarding impulse and gathering them up. But I like to think of it as being a different situation in a way. Inspiration often seems like it's a one-way street. Whereas sometimes I stumble on something like this and I think, well, I've been trying to make that piece for like 14 years. And here it is, all finished on the sidewalk. And so I like to think of it almost like looking in a mirror. There's something there that's part of me already. I don't know what it says about me that it's like made of toxic waste, but I'm in a conversation with this, whatever it is. This is a pile of just little goodies that are kind of studies, exercises, three-dimensional drawings of a kind. I have a huge table in my studio, and there are piles of these things that move around, and other people come in and they move them around, and some of them turn into jewelry, most of them remain as piles. They're things that I look at. They're sort of almost like little visual Post-it notes of experiments that I'd like to revisit sometime. This is the last in the black and white series of the powder coat pieces with a frame of 18 karat gold. Jumping to some color. About 8 years ago, I went on a trip to Mexico City for a jewelry conference, and I had a lot of time to walk around while I was there, and I found myself absolutely just dumbstruck by what I was seeing colors do. And I think part of it was being in that open state that you're in when you travel, where like some part of me was left unlocked or unguarded, and colors sort of started affecting me in ways that I hadn't felt before. And I've always been terrified of color, still am to some degree. Was afraid to use it in my work, didn't have it in my house, still don't have it in my clothes. It was just, anything doing with color seemed like a really advanced move, and I've always been afraid to try. And but something about wandering around these streets and seeing these things, it was like, here's some red and some blue and some poopy yellow, and they're all just hanging out, and it's like, there's not a problem, it's fine. And here's a little red doorknob on a yellow door, that's also okay. And I kept getting this kind of lesson that like these things can all coexist, and it began to kind of seep in. And I came back to San Francisco and kept making black and white things because these things take a while to, gestate. But somewhere in this period, I met the guy who's now my partner, and we were part of an elaborate sneak attack setup scheme by a good friend of mine and his mother. They converged in my studio, and we're all chatting, and I found out later that he had been sort of racking his brains to try to figure out a way to see me again, but he's standing in my place of work, and his mother is 3 feet away, and the best thing he could come up with was to ask me if I could repair a broken belt buckle that he had. And I was sort of like, I could try. He was really cute, so I said yes, even though I have no business trying to repair a brass belt buckle. And it had come out that he was a software engineer, and I said, well, instead of paying me, would you take a stab at writing me a piece of software? And he said, well, maybe, what do you want? And I said, I want something where I can sit down at my computer and press a button, and it will generate infinite colors in infinite combinations. And I want that to go on forever. And he said, okay, I'll see what I can do. And so fast forward a couple of weeks, he comes to pick up his belt buckle. which I chickened out and I sent it out to a laser welder. I was like, I'm gonna melt my face off. I do not know what to do with this thing. And so he shows up and he says, hey, take this little piece of code, throw it in your browser, and let's see what we have. And so I did, and out popped this. And then I hit the refresh button, and I got this. And then I got this, and then I got that, and that, and that, and this. And on, and I was totally hooked. And so he basically made a shower that, like, instead of water comes out, it's colors, and they just keep coming. And to this day, this is one of my favorite tools, and it literally fixes my brain. When I start getting bogged down or choked up, I still get very just kind of tripped up and self-doubting around color. That might come as a surprise to people who've seen my recent work, but I get stuck for hours. And this loosens all of that up and makes it possible to move forward again. So the belt buckle broke 2 weeks later. So I totally got the good end of that deal. But a couple other nice things came out of that transaction. Is way too crude a word, but that situation. One of which is that the color really flew into my work, and I'm having so much fun, and it's just kind of, it's this totally new arena that I'm loving. The other is that things with the guy really took off too, and we are getting married next Saturday. And I just really wanted to say that during a slide lecture. So these are modular bracelet forms that are, their parts are laser cut, and it's somewhere between a one-off and a unique piece. Each one is different. I can do them in different widths, and every time I do it, I can do something different with the colors, which is a total blast. So I'm just going to spin through some of the more colorful pieces that are in the last 3-4 years. Necklace in maple and linen, another one in that series. Brooch in maple and steel. Another brooch. This is it's a constructed necklace. It starts as one long strip, and then I'm building up the components, and then I cut it up and drill it to make the sort of bead forms. Faceted maple. Andy mentioned my studio is above a tile factory, and you may be seeing some influence from that here. I'm also looking at a lot of brutalist architecture right now, and that might also be apparent. There are lots of influences coming in. This is another modular piece. I can do this in any number of combinations. So it's really, it's almost like somewhere between a toy and a sort of devotional exercise at this point. It goes back and forth. The pendants are pretty large. They're like 4.5 inches across, maybe. This is walnut maple and vitreous enamel on steel. So I want to talk for a second about Heath, which is, you may know the Heath Ceramics Company is super beloved, iconic, California brand that makes these gorgeous, clean ceramics in these amazing colors. And they, in the last 15 years, the company was taken over by a couple of industrial designers who took it over from Edith Heath, who was declining, and the company had been a little bit in decline too. And they absolutely brought it back from the brink, and they've done just amazing things with the company. And their original Sausalito factory was just jammed full, and they weren't really able to function. It was sort of impacted, and they needed to expand their production as well. So they took on a 60,000 square foot factory building in the middle of the Mission District, smack in the middle of San Francisco. And it used to be like an institutional laundry. It was totally grim. All the windows were painted over, very sort of drab, depressing place. And they took that and they turned it into this, which has become a real community center in the Mission of art, design, craft, information. There's a Tartine opened a restaurant. There's this amazing newsstand that has print publication from all over the world. There's furniture. There's There's a print shop. It's just an amazing, amazing place. And as part of their vision for this, they wanted to bring in like-minded makers, some smaller businesses that share their values and their aesthetic, and let those elements kind of pollinate in the factory. So I was one of the people invited to be part of that. This is my studio before I filled it with 700,000 tiny things. This is after I did that. It's still a beautiful place. I pinch myself every day when I show up. I feel like the luckiest artist in San Francisco. And they take care of me in so many ways. I threw these in for anyone who went on the factory tour yesterday, the steel plant tour. This was part of an exhibition at Heath. They have a huge gallery, and it has in it these they're like 2-story tall black steel boilers they were taken off a World War II naval ship, and they were used in the laundry. They're not in use anymore, but they're kind of looming over this beautiful big gallery space. And all the artists were asked to respond to that space. And so this is these are like tiny, tiny spider babies that just sit underneath this huge mama machine. These are all about 2 inches tall. This was some of the most fun I've ever had in my studio. I loved making these. Outside of a lot of collaboration and a lot of projects that we do together, and just a lot of sort of back and forth down the hall, Heath is pretty much responsible for giving me a foundation for my survival in San Francisco. It's an incredibly expensive city, and it's a very hard place to make a living. But they've sort of taken me under their wing. They sell my work in all 4 of their showrooms and on their website. They do a seasonal collection with me every 6 months. They bring me a set of dishes that are special colors that they do only every 6 months. So there's a spring and a fall. And we design a little micro collection around those colors, and those get released with a lot of promotion. And so there's, in addition to placing large orders on a regular basis with me, every 6 months there's this extra boost where there's a kind of this outpouring of jewelry that goes with their very sought after seasonal collection. This is one of the pieces that I did with them. So I say all that partly to acknowledge that I'm in a really lucky place. I would be able to make a living without them, but they have made it much safer for me to do so and much saner for me to do so, and I'm really grateful. And hopeful that I was thinking, does Nucor have an artist fostering program? I don't know, can this be happening in other places? That would be great. And I'm gonna go to it's gonna play and zoom in. It has a gorgeous soundtrack, and it's like a 10-minute video, so I just took a few seconds out. We're gonna look at the wheel that's kind of in the top right of the actual machine. Is it going? Oh, yeah. So it's gonna slow down. Oops. There's wire coming in from the left, and on the right you can see there are these kind of fingers bolted onto the wheel, and there's the wire coming out, and each little finger affects a different bend on the wire, and then there's a little cutter guy that comes and chops it off, and then the next bit of wire comes out, and on and on. And this machine makes about 1,000 paper clips a minute, and they just toss into a little box and they're off to market. And of course the students were like, why did you just show us that? That's like painful. We thought we were doing so well. But what's really cool to me is not how far out of reach this is, but actually how close this is to where we got. I am fascinated by the space in between the needle nose pliers and this, I don't know, $500,000 thing. Because I actually think we can get much closer to this and still be human and still have nuance and a tactile experience in our work, but have ease. So the next one that I pulled up was a little more less robotic. Here's a guy bending stuff using a tool that I also really want. And this machine's also very expensive, but it's I could make something like that, or like a really rudimentary version of that. I could make that out of like tube and stuff I have around. It wouldn't be as precise or as powerful, but on my scale, if I was just making earring wires, I can do that. And he's a human. He's making decisions. He's playing around. He's just riffing right now. So coming closer and closer back to the bench. The other day, I looked over and I had given my assistant a big pile of these tiny, tiny little necklace parts to finish. They were castings, and she was cleaning off the sprues. And I said, maybe stick a little sanding disc in the lathe instead of holding it in your hand in the flex shaft. Maybe it'd be easier if you use the lathe, because we were doing them by hand, and then we used the flex shaft. So she's over at the lathe, and she's totally craned. Her body's in a terrible position, and her neck is craned, and she's got her arms sort of like twisted so that she can approach the lathe, just because of the way that tool is set up. And I said, is that comfortable? And she said, no. And I said, okay, let's figure something else out. So within 3 minutes, we had taken 2 broom handle clips, a scrap of plywood, and a pony clamp, and made a front-facing precision disc sander for this tiny little operation. She was having trouble with the little part like flying out of her hand, and so we got a miniature pony clamp, and that's doing the work of gripping those tiny things. She's got her hand resting on the other clamp. She's got a bar stool that's the right height, and she's listening to a podcast and drinking tea, and she's super happy now, and the work is happening in half the time. So every time I've found a way to reduce the strain and create more ease, it also just instantly bumps up the profitability of whatever it is we're making, because the time goes down. It's almost never gone the other way, where I make something nicer to do, and then it gets worse market-wise. So I want to throw this chart up here, and don't get too far into the weeds on this. It's a little hard to look at. I just want to show this as the kind of source inspiration for a chart that I made that shows, this is about sort of how long you can spend making something more efficient before you're wasting your time. And this is something we did at Penland that with the class, I put in the top thing, which is just like, what if I, instead of turning each of my 8 bench lamps off individually, what if I put them on a power strip? We've all done something like that. I save 1/10 of a second each time. And how many times per month do you do that? And then we started just filling in. Some of these other tasks are imaginary, some are real. And we were just kind of trying to fill it in with some realistic number of alterations that a regular person could do in a short time. And when you add it up, it's 105 hours. That's almost 3 full weeks of 8-hour days of work. These things are not a big deal. So this is super powerful, because all of these things are things we can do internal to our business. Like the market's doing whatever it wants. You get in a show, you don't get in a show, your client shows up, doesn't show up. All of this stuff is just inside. And all of these things can be changed, often without much expense. Some of these things cost money to do the change. But anyway, so that's make-believe. But in real life, this is that necklace that I said we make in lots of different color combinations, and we sell a lot of them. And at one point, I looked at the numbers and I was like, ooh, if we could change just that one piece, that would be a huge deal in terms of getting back some of that time and using it for something else. So over the course of like 6 months, my assistants and I, every time we did a batch of these, we would just slow down, observe, see where things were stalling out. I would watch their hands. I would watch, when the beads fell on the floor, or if they got tangled with each other, or whatever was happening. We said, well, how do we fix that? How do we fix that? How do we fix that? And like $3 and a couple hours of tweaking later, we had knocked 20, I can't remember if it was 20 or 25 minutes off the completion of every single necklace. And we sell about 300 of these a year, and that's that 100 hours. So just with one piece, just paying attention to what was happening, I knocked off 3. That's a vacation. It's a nice vacation. So I just want to like kind of illustrate this and talk about how much power we have to to change these tiny things that then bear fruit in all these other ways. Another kind of random example that I want to throw in, because I'm having a ton of fun with it right now, is 3D printing, which I've never had an interest in using CAD for making jewelry. But at one point I wanted to make a version of these earrings in a different shape. And we were doing these one at a time. We had a jig to do the bending, but they were, it was slow going and they weren't super consistent. And I thought, I wish I had a mandrel that was the shape of the earring that I want to make. That seems super basic. So I went online and found a browser-based CAD program. It's called Tinkercad, and it's super simple. Like, I think it's maybe for kids. I'm not sure, but it's perfect for me. And I pulled in a shape and extruded it and figured out how to hollow it out. There are tutorials on there. Anyone can do this. It's really, really easy. And I pressed a button and it went to a 3D printing company. And then 2 weeks later in the mail, I got my mandrel that's the shape of my earring. And now we can wrap like a dozen pairs of these in like a minute and a half or something around this thing. There's a little slot to cut them apart. And then there are a couple more steps involving other tools to close and put the beads on, solder, and now I have a pair of earrings. And they're much more pleasant to make. There's a satisfaction in using these tools. They're just fun to feel them at work. And also the earrings are more consistent now. There's another one of those. Now I'm sort of like, how many different shapes of hoop earring could I do? Like, this world is my oyster. So just a couple more of the 3D printed jigs that are helping me also in the one-of-a-kind work. A lot of my one-of-a-kind work has kind of modules, also intentionally, because I want to be able to have other people help me make them. Otherwise, it's really slow if it's just me. So I have a little drill jig for every size of dowel that I have to make these necklaces, and I use the ones that have a shank that's consistent in size. So I just set up one end, and the other end I just change it for the size of the dowel. I showed you this a minute ago, and after the first one, which was super, super slow, I thought, I want to make more of those in all different colors. So I made a couple of jigs for the different thicknesses of metal that help me just drill that hole straight through. And it's really breezy and fun. And the last thing is my new favorite toy. This is a little more complex. This took a few hours. I got a little obsessed. But it's a wire cutter lengtherator. So you can stick 3 or 4 wires in that hole. I've just got one, but it's got a little dial for dimension. It's got standard on one side, metric on the other, and a little peg. So you take that plunger and put it where you want, and then feed the wire through and snip your earring wire to whatever length you want. And once the whole length of wire is gone, you take it out of the vise and you've got your little pile of wire. And this is not the last version. I want to put like magnets in the bottom. This is probably going to just be ongoing for like 10 years. I'll be changing this every week. But that's kind of where I've gotten to with these tools. I'm having so much fun inventing and then seeing what comes, and then I'll change it and see what comes. And these are pretty inexpensive to order. I think that tool, once I ordered it, was like $12 or something. And they come in 2 weeks. So to end, the last little cubby on that sheet that I had, which was about sustaining income, that's also going to be different for everybody. I live in San Francisco, which is ridiculous, and everyone has different overhead and different needs, and they're at different stages. And so figuring out what that word viable, what does that mean? It can have a lot of different factors, like just marketability or what your overhead is. It'll be different for everybody, and maybe even change depending on the situation. But this is kind of a picture of that filter that I put everything through, and it's really been helpful to me to have a drawing of it, because I have like hundreds of ideas kind of avalanching down all the time, as I'm sure we all do. And sometimes it can be hard to be really discerning in the moment about which ones are the right ones to tackle or to accept. And finding myself in the center of this left-hand side picture, that is always the place that is most sustaining to me. And I'm really convinced that for every set of 5 ideas that I love equally, one of them will be the most beneficial to me financially. And there's absolutely no crime in picking that one over the other 4. Like, just nothing wrong with that at all. And looking at this helps me make those decisions. And it helps me forego the ones that don't fit this, knowing that the next thing that happens is going to be one that does. So I just want to wish for everyone that we spend our lives living in this left-hand universe and that we don't have the one on the right very much. Thank you.